Nick Gauntlet, Private Night, by Austin McKinley. Chapter 9. Raelgar and the Duke ride up to the city gates with me and Galena on her horse and chains. They draw back in shock when they see the townspeople, led by Cadmia and Warren, guarding the gate with torches and pitchforks. "Hold it right there, your lordship," says Warren. "We don't like the way you run this town anymore, so you're out." One of the guards shouts, "Stand aside for your duke, peasant." "Don't peasant me, son," snaps Cadmia. "I know your mother." Inside the town, the citizens riot. They tear down the duke's banners and trample them in the mud. Fires have broken out. The duke surveys the scene in horror. He looks at me, says, "What have you done?" "Seems to me you brought it on yourself," says I. A group of townspeople break from the bushes and surround us. The horses rear, and I fall off the back of Galena's mount. The townspeople stand between me and the sheriff, pull the sheriff's men down and subdue them. I get to my feet. Raelgar rides towards me. Calomel heads him off. "Leave him," Calomel says. He rides up beside Galena's horse, drags her over to his. "Ride behind me," he commands. "Close the castle gates. Organize the defense. I have work to attend." Galena and I share a look as Calomel turns horse and rides hard for the gate. The townspeople guarding it, unused to standing their ground, scatter in confusion, cheer to see the Duke's retreat. "Go on, then," shouts Warren. I survey the crowd as a townsman helps unshackle me. "What are you people doing?" I ask them. Cadmia steps to the front, holds the broadsword from the bar. "You look to be in trouble, Nick," she tells me. "But this is war, Tuddy. The other nobles can't ignore this. You'll all be killed." "You're always saying a knight shouldn't fight a meaningless battle." Cadmia rounds on me. "But you fight all the time. Now these people are fighting for their homes, and they need a knight to lead them." She thrusts the sword at me. "So lead them." I look at her. She doesn't flinch. "Shouldn't have said it if you didn't mean it," says she. "Come on, Cadmia," says Warren. "We can't waste time on this weak-livered worm." "I need to get something first," I say. I take Galena's horse and pull myself up. "I'll meet you at the castle." I ride off into the town. Warren steps to Cadmia's side. "He'll run," he says, "just like the Crusades." Cadmia sets her jaw. The Duke drags Galena down the stairs into the dungeon and hurls her at the work table. Raelgar follows apace. "My Duke," he says. "The town." "Never mind the town," barks Calomel. To Galena, he says, "Get started, girl. I want you to recreate the experiment." "But I don't have the things I need," she protests. "Just start the work," Calomel tells her. "We'll send Raelgar for supplies when necessary." "I need a blacksmith," says she. "Husband, what's going on?" Lady Antimony descends the stairs. "Have you seen what's happening outside?" "Silence, woman," Calomel snaps. "A brazen head. This could be the pinnacle of my great work." Galena looks from one to the other and starts mixing chemicals. I enter the blackened remains of my tower and hop painfully between the remaining stairs. I toss my few charred possessions around. Light glitters, reflected in the shards of the broken stained glass window. I find a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Warren, Cadmia, and an army of townspeople gather at the castle gate. "I'm through waiting," says Warren. "If we're going to oust the Duke once and for all, we'd better do it now before they solidify their defenses." "Just wait." Cadmia looks down the street. "He's coming." Not to disappoint her, I emerge from an alley and ride up. "Evening, folks," says I. Cadmia smiles to see me. "I knew it," she says. Warren frowns. "You still want me to," I ask her, indicate the sword. "No one better," she says, and hands it up to me. "Have to do what a lady asks." I take the sword, observe it with reverence. I give it an experimental swing and look at the townspeople. "It's a fine line between a knight and a criminal," I tell them. "You live your life on the edge of a blade. You're going to make mistakes." I level the sword at them. But a knight stands up for what he, or she, believes. For justice. When you defend the weak and right what's been wronged, then you're knights. Every one of you. The crowd cheers. I have them wheel carts into place as a defense from arrows and turn to face the ramparts. "So what are we waiting for?" asks Warren. "Patience," says I. "More than one way to storm a castle." In the Duke's experimental dungeon, Galena sloshes chemicals together in a flask. The Duke sits to one side, lost in thought. Galena sets the flask down and picks up a candle. In his moment of distraction, Calomel notices what she's doing too late. "Wait! No, girl! That's not the way you'll..." Galena uses the candle to light a hidden fuse. The spark winds around the table leg. Antimony screams. Duke Calomel dives out of the way as Relgar tries to stamp the fuse out, but the spark races across the floor and disappears behind the stone wall. Galena leaps into the giant empty iron cauldron. Calomel, Antimony, and Relgar rush to follow. The townspeople and I jump as a massive explosion shakes the whole castle and blows a wide hole in the exterior wall. The townspeople gasp. "What in God's name?" asks Cadmia as a purple aluminum iodine cloud pours from the breach and fire breaks out on the timber works. The drawbridge crashes down to reveal the compromised portcullis. "You were expecting this?" Warren asks me. The sheriff's men scream and stagger around with acid burns. Something like flambe is her specialty. I unwrap the package I took from my office. My old Crusader helmet, with the sponge built into the faceplate. I take off my hat and prop the helmet on my head, faceplate up, and mount Galena's roan. "Don't breathe the fumes," I tell them, and spur my horse across the drawbridge. The townspeople follow me, swarm through the shattered portcullis into the castle courtyard. Guards rush to meet us, and the townspeople engage in battle. The steel feels good in my hand. I'd almost forgotten the clash, the ring, the gratifying resonance that travels down my spine and into my gut. It makes me hungry for more. I hack and pierce a path into the heart of the castle with the broadsword and my crossbow until I see a crater to my left where the lab used to be, beneath the courtyard. The cracks travel all the way up the wall to the compromised gatehouse. "Galena," I call. I can make out figures below in the overturned cauldron, obstructed by rubble. "Nick, help!" calls Antimony. "We're trapped." "Working on it," says I. Alaric and Boren rush up to me, halberds ready. Gotta settle these pikes first. I dismount and holster my crossbow. "One weapon each," I tell them. "Don't do us any favors," says Boren. "It's not a duel." "Honor's a funny thing," I say. "Selfish, really. I give you every chance to level the field so there can be no argument of advantage. So in the end, it's clear who's the better." I level the blade, true edge to my opponents, and wait. They hesitate. Alaric indicates the door. "I'm gonna go." "Good man," says I, as he slinks away. "And you?" I say to Boren. Boren growls and runs at me. "Thought so," says I. In a single fluid move, I sidestep the blow, hook Boren's neck with my crossguard. I throw him to the ground and press him down with a sharp end, but stop just short of actual bloodletting. "Made my point?" I ask, and Boren nods. "I believe you know where the gate is." I let him go and Boren runs. Across the courtyard, I see Warren, who pauses in his fight to nod approval. I look for a way down into the lab and determine the only one is through the main building. Looks like I gotta make a house call. I drop my faceplate and breathe bitter air through the sponge. I kick in the door to the Great Hall. The dogs and purple smoke-blinded guards pour out of it and rush me. I parry, clobber, and shoot my way through the crowd. They have one-handed arming swords and bucklers, small shields which are a distinct advantage despite their deceptively small diameter. I, however, brought a heavy English broadsword to the fight, a true knight's weapon. Let's be honest, they might as well have faced a line of cavalry. I cut them down like so many stalks of wheat. Well, if wheat fought back and got its licks in every couple of rounds. I fight down the remains of the circular stone staircase. A left-handed helix favors my descent, frees my sword arm, and hampers those of my opponents. I storm into the demolished dungeon, defeat the guards, and shove through debris. The last knot of sheriff's men surrounded the Duke, Antimony, Relgar, and Galena, and worked to free them. They're all a little singed and worse for wear as they climb from the cauldron, cough and choke on the thick air. "Relgar!" I challenge. Warren and Cadmia come in, see the scene, and guard the door. "You're not with this rabble, are you, Nick?" Relgar asks. "Never abandon a noble cause." I say to Calomel, "Sins come home, the goat goes free." "And back into the charnel house," he sneers. "Guards!" Raelgar's men rush to the attack, and I meet them with steel and arrow. I don't want to talk myself up, but I will say this. There was at least one thing I needed to be a knight in King Richard's crusade. I'm a terror with a real sword. I tend to start from a position with the blade resting lightly on my shoulder. That way, when I snap the pommel down, the blade strikes without telegraphing the move. It's a simple motion, like a cantilevered punch. My arm's steel counterpoint. One of the Duke's soldiers comes at me. I drive his blade into the dirt and make him eat my pommel. He doesn't appear to like the taste. Another waits. I lower my sword to the iron gate guard, my whole body low behind it, exposing my head. It looks vulnerable, but it limits my opponent's options. When he takes the opening, I bind, wind, and find my target with the short side of the blade. I twist, turn, use the flat of the blade. The sword is a multi-purpose killing tool I use in every way I can imagine. I clear the room of opponents until the only one left to cross swords with is Raelgar. I cut to the cross-section, look to cleave my opponent in two before he thinks to do the same. Fortunately for him, he's a quick thinker. Our blades slide against each other down to the crossbar. "You're not going to defend the Duke too?" I ask him. "Honor demands it," says he. "As you like," I allow. Raelgar and I fall to swords. I bind and throw his arms wide. This is the art. Any old stooge can swing a blade. It's what you do in the instant after contact that counts. Double half cuts, parry, and repose. You live or die not by your first move, but how your second, third, fourth, and fifth respond to changing conditions. It's not your strength or your wits, but your adaptability that's in question. We range throughout the wrecked lab, trampling glass. I knock Raelgar against the table and a flask of acid spills on his arm. Pain. "Sorry," I say. Raelgar trips me and forces my head into the furnace. "Always said your temper would land you in trouble," he tells me. I kick him off, stand, and advance. Perhaps cooler heads will yet prevail. We pull, grapple, brawl, and throw. Two consummate warcraftsmen using every surface of our weapons and limbs. Iron sparks fly off our blades, slight irregularities, remnants of the forge. I swing to open guard, send them arcing across the laboratory table. I wonder briefly if they'll contact anything combustible. "This is really how you want it, Sheriff?" I ask him. "Fight to the finish?" "Mano a mano," says Raelgar. "Didn't know you spoke Spanish," says I. "I traveled a bit," he tells me. The fight rages on, but both of us tire. Sword fighting is actually exhausting if you don't keep up with it. In less than a minute, my lungs are screaming, my arms are horse glue, and I'm looking for the least dishonorable way to cheat. We step back, breathe, lunge again. I bludgeon into my opponent and trip him up, in a swift, and I must admit, clever move. I outmaneuver Raelgar and drop him to his knees. Once he's on the ground, my arms do the one thing they were going to do anyway, plunge downward. But I still have the strength to stop short of his neck. "Do you yield?" I ask. Raelgar looks around at his defeated men. "Suppose I should. This petty duke's not worth another good man's death," I say. Raelgar looks at Calomel, who cowers in the corner with Antimony and Galena. "Or yours either. Come to mention it." He shoots back, but lowers his sword. I give him a hand up. "Thank you, old friend," says I. Antimony rushes to my side. "My hero! I always knew this day would come. Now you can take me away from all this. We can be together." "Antimony!" cries the Duke, aghast. "One side, Lady Calomel." I throw her arm off. "You're not the main attraction of every tournament." I look at Galena. Antimony looks from one of us to the other. "Wait a minute," she says. "You're here for her? My maid, the murderess?" "You knew?" says I. "Of course I knew," says Antimony. "I wasn't very well going to lose my help over the affair, no matter how sick what she did was." "Galena was a symptom, lady," I tell her. "You're the plague." "So what happens to her?" Raelgar asks of Galena. "In seeking justice, we're all guilty. We're all guilty of wanting to know the truth, of committing any wrong to reach the truth. Well, now I know it. I'm not so sure what I want. I'm the only one who can serve justice for Marcus now. Only the wronged have the right to dispense justice and the responsibility to act mercifully. I'm King Richard at the Port of Acre. I can leverage my authority to make an example of those who defy me, but the just thing is to show mercy, unlike what they showed me. Mercy is noble. No body, I shrug, pretending a nonchalance I don't feel. Not a scrap, just blood and clockwork. Damnedest thing. Wasn't much left of Marcus either, says Relgar. Is that justice? Love's all she wanted, I tell him, and she got treachery for her trouble. We've both killed men for less. No one knows if we don't. The system sure ain't just. The town deserves to know the truth, Relgar says again. I look from Cadme and Warren to the Duke and Antimony. They already know it, says I. He was your friend, Relgar nods. Only you can guess what he would have wanted. You sure? No, I reply. But I got enough ghosts on me. Don't need hers, too. Besides, she makes a mean crossbow. Galena lunges for the table, grabs an unbroken flask. Sorry, she says, but I'm through letting men control my fate. Galena, no, I say, but she dashes it to the ground and a cloud of purple smoke envelops her. Relgar and I cough. When it clears, she's gone. Damn, I say. Guess I'll have to look after the crossbow myself. I look out over the town from the castle ramparts. Smoke still rises, but the fires are out. The mist burns off and returns to the hillocks and depressions in the distance. As I watch, a cloaked figure takes the back way out of town, pushes a wheelbarrow full of braziers and chemical jars. I catch a glimpse of her face. It's Galena. We always have a choice. Marcus made his, Galena made hers. This was mine. Once removed from this situation, I'm betting she'll be a better person. Unlike King Richard, I don't believe in undue punishment in these cases of ideological confusion and betrayal of the heart. So if I can forgive Galena, who in a moment of passion killed her philandering boyfriend to punish her backstabbing mistress, and let her start over, maybe I can forgive myself too. Maybe you can transmute lead into gold. A few years later, a mug by the name of Albertus Magnus preached the peaceful coexistence of science and religion, claimed he discovered the philosopher's stone, and made a brazen head, among other things. Maybe he did. Maybe he had help. Cadme and Relgar join me on the wall walk. We watch from the tower as the townspeople run the Duke and Antimony out the main gate, beat the old man with his own cane. It's cruel, but the world's an unfair place. I couldn't have caused a riot in a town that wasn't sick of oppression and ready to try self-rule. Glad you reconsidered your loyalty, Sheriff, I say. My loyalty's to the Lord of the Castle, Relgar tells me. Right now, looks like that's you. Don't want to be anybody's lord, says I. Lords lead to iniquity. We can serve the people of this town together. Living like a king, no doubt, says Relgar. I scrutinize the castle. Might take a tower for myself, I admit. Seeing my old place got redecorated, and I don't like the color. But mainly I was thinking. I looked to Cadmia. Problem with the Lady of the Lake is, it's a bit small, and a bit of a walk. Are you serious? She asks me. Occasionally. I turn to Relgar. This place would make a good tavern, don't you think? Cadmia throws her arms around me and kisses me. Relgar shakes his head and smiles. When Cadmia breaks the kiss, I offer her the sword. You should have this back, I say. Cadmia shakes her head and pushes it back to me. I look to Relgar. Keep it, says he. Good to have a knight in town. I put my arm around Cadmia and the two of us smiled at Relgar in friendship. Years that came, the townsfolk's movement snowballed, eventually even rolled up the barons who forced King John to sign the Magna Carta. It included the right to trial by jury, unlike the kind I got. It's a start, but a piece of paper never gives you justice. That only comes from a blade in the right hands. As for me, sometimes being a knight isn't about following your feudal lord. Good thing, too, because that's pretty much how I'm forged. Sometimes it's about doing what you know is true and honorable, no matter the consequences. No one's going to hand you justice. She has to be won. And she's always a judgment call, which is why in all the statues she carries a sword. Justice is a knight. The end. This audio drama of Nick Gauntlet, Private Knight, is performed by David Zietz and produced by Austin McKinley for Flying Car LLC. It was engineered by Lenny Long at Roseland Park Recording in Sarasota, Florida.